We have an NBA trade. Finally, it feels like we've been waiting. The trade deadline is only a couple of weeks away at this point, but we have the Lakers and the Wizards making a deal today. The deal is basically Kendrick Nunn and a couple of second-round picks in exchange for Rui Hachimura from the Washington Wizards. And if you clicked on this video, you might be thinking, why is this a big deal? Like, why is this even worth the video? I think this is a really good indicator of what the plan is for each of these teams leading up to the trade deadline. And of course, when it involves the Lakers, it's going to be interesting to a lot of people. So I felt like a video was necessary. First things first, let's talk about Washington. So if you've watched my videos for the last couple of years, you know that I always kind of liked Rui Hachimura as a prospect and as a player. And whether it was because he couldn't stay on the floor because of injuries or he just never really found his fit, just hasn't worked out for him, which is disappointing, not only for a former top 10 pick, but for a team in Washington that needed that influx of talent. They needed Rui to work out. And anytime you draft a guy as highly as they did a couple of years ago when they're trading him away for basically nothing here, a couple of second round picks, it's not a great sign for the development of the player as well as kind of what it is, what it means for your organization as a whole. But also, this to me is a pretty clear sign that Washington is giving up on the year. And there's two avenues to that, right? One is to try and be as bad as possible, to try and get the first pick, to try and get Victor Wembanyama or some of the other talented players in this draft class. This is the first of, I think, a lot of different moves we're going to see around the league at the deadline, where not only are teams trying to upgrade and improve their rosters, but they're also, in some cases like this, actively trying to make their teams worse to improve their chances at a high pick in this upcoming draft. And not that Rui Hachimura is like a game-changing player for them, but like Bradley Beal's out with injury. They already have Kristaps Porzingis listed as week to week due to an ankle sprain, which to me means he might possibly get moved. And then we have Hachimura getting traded as well. So there's that avenue, actively making your team worse so that you can quote unquote tank. And then the other is, are there other moves coming for Washington? As I mentioned, Porzingis and Beal as well. Both guys randomly throughout the season have had points in time. Now, they haven't necessarily been the most durable players in the past, but both of them have had instances here where they've missed random stretches of time that makes you wonder if maybe there was a trade in the works. They don't want to risk those guys getting hurt. I think we're going to be seeing a lot of rest days, a lot of injury management for both Kristaps Porzingis and Bradley Beal over the next couple of weeks as we lead up to the trade deadline, as they look to possibly make some moves. Now, for the Lakers, this might not seem like that consequential of a move for them, but I like the deal for them, and two, I think it does tell us a lot about what they're thinking here moving forward, because they don't really give up anything in this. I mean, Kendrick Nunn meant nothing to their roster. 3 second-round picks is whatever, like second-round picks get traded away all the time. And bringing in Hachimura, I think they're hoping it's going to be, ironically, trading from Washington, kind of like a light version of what Kyle Kuzma was and could have been for them in the past. A guy that can play in the front court, can guard a little bit, can score a little bit individually, isn't an incredibly consistent off-ball floor spacer, but someone that you hope can provide that for you. And importantly, should, in theory, play well alongside Anthony Davis. He's still young. He's a talent upgrade for them, I think, if he can stay on the floor. And it's just kind of an upside flyer for them. But importantly, this deal, of course, because Hachimura is just not that valuable of a player, does not include either of those future first-round picks that the Lakers have been waving around to the rest of the league. I think it's 27 and 29 future first-round picks that are clearly their best trade asset at the moment. And the Lakers have been playing better. They're inching up towards 500. They're still waiting on the return of Anthony Davis. And to me, if you kind of were throwing the season away, as was maybe indicated in the past here in terms of just it not being worth it with the injury to Davis and how old LeBron is to trade away these 27 and 29 picks, then I don't even think that you would make this deal, trading away 3 second-round picks, which doesn't sound like a lot, but still could be useful down the road. If you were planning on just throwing the season away, I don't think this is a deal that you necessarily would make, or you wouldn't make at least, 2 weeks before the trade deadline. So this could be an indicator that they are starting to see some promising signs from this team, even without Anthony Davis, with as well as LeBron has been playing, that maybe those 27 and 29 future first-round picks are possibly in play here. I think, interestingly, a video coming out later this week for me, I think Damian Lillard is suddenly in play here as a midseason trade candidate. It would be difficult for the Lakers to get him, given the limited assets they have, even as valuable as some teams do think that 27 and 29 first-round picks are. But things like that, even Bradley Beal possibly being in play, I think there are a lot of different options for the Lakers here if they did want to use those picks. And this might be an indicator that they are thinking about being more aggressive with this season than they would have been just a few weeks ago. And then on the edges of all of that, there are a couple of other things that I think are interesting with this deal. It's already been reported that Washington wanted to move on from Hachimura because he is going to need a new contract, and they didn't they didn't really view him as a long-term piece for the franchise, certainly with someone like Kyle Kuzma already there. Again, ironically, that this is a trade involving the Lakers where Kuzma came from, and they would rather, spend that capital, spend that money on retaining Kyle Kuzma in the offseason rather than having both him and Hachimura on long-term deals and that in roles that are pretty equivalent. They basically play the same spots on the floor, although, of course, Kuzma is much better. And then again, for the Lakers, I think maybe you could spin him as an asset over the next 2 weeks prior to the trade deadline. It would be surprising if that was the case, but maybe they expand this into a 3-team deal here over the next couple of days if they wanted to. But again, just having a younger player on the roster that provides size for the Lakers, I kind of like the deal for them. I think what really is going to be the big difference maker and the differentiator for them is if Hachimura can space the floor, because if you can get a guy that's bigger, can play alongside Anthony Davis, and can space, that really helps them. But given what we've seen out of Hachimura so far in his career, I think it would be optimistic to think that he is going to be someone that's really going to move the needle for them. I think it's better than some of the other, more veteran options they could have gone out there and gotten. But considering he's on an expiring contract and just been a disappointment as a top 10 pick, not necessarily someone that I think you're expecting to do a ton for the Lakers. But again, I do think that it's important to read this as an indication of what the Lakers' intentions might be as we get closer to the deadline. Now, unfortunately for the Lakers, even if they did want to move Hachimura, in a few weeks or in the offseason even, he doesn't necessarily help them in what is one of the biggest challenges that they have in terms of making trades right now, and that is they don't really have salaries to bring in some of these big-time players like Bradley Beal, Damian Lillard, these guys. It's really difficult it's actually impossible to make a trade for one of those guys without including Russell Westbrook in the deal. Just from a salary perspective, like they don't have a couple of $10 million guys they can throw, back to Portland in exchange for Damian Lillard. So it is a bit of a weird situation where they went from a team that Russell Westbrook and the 2 first-round picks were pretty obviously their best trade package. That's why there was so much conversation about what they could do with Indiana and the Miles Turner and the Buddy Hield thing. But now that Russ is playing pretty well for them and pretty integral to what they're doing, maybe this is actually in place of what they possibly could do with those 2 future first-round picks, because they realize that from a salary cap perspective and from a just in terms of matching salaries and trades, it's really difficult to bring in someone that in their eyes would be worth both of those first-round picks without including Russell Westbrook. And it seems like right now they're reluctant to include Russell Westbrook because he's playing well and he just doesn't have that much value to other teams given how much money he's making this year. So maybe the Lakers are going to try and middle this. They're treating this as one upgrade, and then they'll move one of those first-round picks in exchange for a guy that they can match salary for in a variety of different ways. But generally, if you're a Lakers fan, coming off the win against Portland last night, where you have this crazy second-half comeback, then you have this deal today, things are looking up a little bit. You are trending in the right direction, which is all you could have hoped for given how bad this season started. And, of course, the fact that they owe their first-round pick this year to New Orleans. Still not a great spot to be in, just to be clear. They're not even a 500 basketball team right now. We're still very up in the air on what Anthony Davis is going to be like when he returns from injury and when he's going to return. And this could be the only deal that they make before the trade deadline. This could be it. Rui Hachimura could be the upgrade for the Lakers this year, which would be upsetting, I'm sure, to Lakers fans. But it's really interesting in terms of what it means potentially for both of these teams. Would not be surprised whatsoever if this is the first of 4 or 5 trades that Washington makes at the deadline. I think they're understanding and they're realizing that even as a fully healthy roster, they are not good enough to even be a play-in team this year. And when you're in that situation, you have someone like Bradley Beal, who is expensive as he is, going down to the bottom, trying to get a big-time player in the draft, hopefully getting some better lottery luck than they've gotten lately, is the only way to make it happen, especially when you've got guys like Johnny Davis, who just don't matter, guys that you've recently drafted like Rui, who is a top 10 pick that is already getting traded away. If you can't develop those guys outside of, top 7 picks, then you need to make sure you go to the very top of the draft. And it looks like that's the direction Washington is heading. And if you are Washington and you're one of these teams that's tanking and trying to get worse, 3 second-round picks is not bad for someone like Hachimura. Obviously, it would have been pretty cool if a guy you drafted in the top 10 ended up being better and more valuable and worth more than that as a trade piece. That would have been ideal. But if it's a guy you weren't going to keep anyway, and someone that you didn't want to pay, and someone that was going to walk as a free agent this upcoming offseason anyway, get 3 second-round picks. Maybe that helps you in some of these other deals. Kendrick Nunn probably, I would guess, is just going to get cut or basically isn't going to play for Washington. I'd be very surprised if he's part of any kind of long-term plan that they have there. So overall, it's a difficult trade to grade because it feels inconsequential, but I think it makes sense for both teams. I would give both of them a B+ or a B grade for this. And really, I think this is just a sign of more things to come with the Wizards selling and the Lakers potentially, maybe just a little bit, buying in on this season a little bit more.